Welcome to Nordic Tales. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell us where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's good to know we're not alone in the dark. So, lower the lights and listen closely. This is a story about time, about 8 friends who walked into the mountains together, and what waited for them in the dark beneath. They had been friends since they were boys. Egil, Runar, Kay, Kenneth, Stefan, Torbjorn, Vegard, and Thomas. Life had scattered them across the years, as life does. But they had planned this trip for a long time. One last great adventure, deep into the Norwegian wilderness, before the world pulled them apart for good. And on a bright morning in late summer, all 8 of them met at the end of the last road, shouldered their packs, and walked together into the trees, laughing as if no time had passed at all. For a whole day they climbed, up through old pine forest, where the light fell in long green columns, along rivers that ran cold and silver from the high snow, past waterfalls and still black tarns, and meadows no road had ever touched. They talked the way old friends talk, picking up threads dropped years ago, as if they had never let go. Thomas filmed it all. Vegard led the way. Kay and Kenneth argued about the map, and Egil laughed at both of them. By late afternoon, they were further into the wild than any of them had ever been. The mountains rose around them, vast and patient. And that was when Runar, scouting ahead along a ridge of gray stone, called back to the others. He had found something. A dark opening in the side of the mountain, the mouth of a cave. It was tall and narrow, and breathed a cold, steady air that smelled of deep stone and something older. The sun was already sinking. They were tired, and the cave offered shelter from the wind, and so they made their camp just inside the mouth, where the last gray daylight still reached. They lit a fire. They ate and drank, and the talk and the laughter echoed back to them, strangely off the walls. But Thomas noticed something first. His watch. The hands were moving. Not fast, not yet, but wrong, crawling forward a little quicker than they should. He showed Vegard, who only laughed and said the cold had gotten into it. None of them understood that night that they had walked into a place where time did not run the way it should, that the deeper you went, the faster it flowed. In the morning, the fire had burned to cold ash, far more than one night should have left, and outside the cave mouth, the world looked subtly wrong. The leaves on the birches had turned. A summer evening had become, somehow, the edge of autumn. Just a few days, they told themselves. We slept longer than we thought. But Kay had wandered a little deeper into the cave in the night, only 100 meters, chasing an echo, and when he came back to the fire, his beard had grown. Not a night's worth. Weeks. He stood there, touching his own face, not understanding. And slowly, one by one, they began to understand the rule of that place. Time near the mouth ran almost true, but every step deeper, it ran faster. Minutes in the deep were days at the entrance. Days in the deep were years in the world outside. At first, it was wonder. They were standing inside something impossible. Vegard, ever the bravest, walked 20 paces deeper and back while Thomas filmed. And on the recording you could see it, his hair longer when he returned, his clothes more worn, though he swore he had been gone only a moment. They laughed, the way you laugh when you are afraid and trying not to be. But the fear was growing. because they understood what it meant. If a few steps cost weeks, then how much had already passed outside in the days they had spent at this fire? How long had they really been here? Eagle said the only sane thing. We leave. Now. We go back out into the world, while there is still a world we know, and they gathered their packs to go. But the wilderness has a way of keeping the curious, and not all of them wanted to leave. Thomas could not let it go. A place like this, he said, changes everything we know. We have to see how deep it goes. We have to see what's down there. Vegard, who would follow Thomas anywhere, agreed. The others begged them not to. But you cannot argue a man out of the edge of the world. So they made a pact. Thomas and Vegard would go deeper, just for a short while, just far enough to see, and the other 6 would wait at the mouth by the fire, where time ran almost true. An hour, they said. Give us 1 hour. We will be back before the fire burns low. And with that, Thomas and Vegard turned, switched on their lamps, and walked down into the throat of the mountain, where every step carried them faster and faster, away from everything they had ever loved. Down they went, through chambers of black glass and dripping stone, past pools that had never seen the sun. And the deeper they went, the stranger it became. Their lamps seemed to dim and brighten on their own. Their own voices reached their ears a heartbeat too late. Thomas's watch was spinning now, the hands a blur. They felt fine. They felt like themselves. Only an hour, they kept saying. Only a little further. But behind them, far behind, in the few minutes they spent in that deep and patient dark, the fire at the cave mouth burned down to embers and then to ash. And then the cold crept in over 6 sleeping men who had said they would wait. And outside, beyond the mouth of the cave, the seasons began to turn faster and faster, like pages in a book dropped from a great height. At last, they stopped. Far enough, Thomas said. Let's go back. And they climbed, back up toward the gray light of the entrance, calling out the names of their friends. Egil, Runar, Kay, Kenneth, Stefan, Torbjorn. But no one answered. They reached the place where the camp had been. The fire was gone, not burned out. Gone, only a black stain on the stone, and a few flakes of rust where the iron pot had been. Their friends' packs lay collapsed and rotted, the fabric falling to dust at a touch. Vegard found Kay's knife, the blade eaten thin with rust, as though it had lain there for 100 years. And from the mouth of the cave, where they had walked in under a late summer sun, came a light that neither of them recognized. A colder, stranger daylight. They walked toward it, and they stepped outside. The forest was gone. Where the old pines had stood, there was now a wide, quiet valley, terraced and tended, full of plants that no one had ever planted in their time. The mountains were the same patient shapes against the sky, but everything beneath them had changed. And there were people, tall and slender and still. Their skin was pale as the inside of a shell, their eyes large and dark and gentle, made for a softer light than the sun. They did not seem surprised. They had been waiting. One of them came forward and looked at Thomas and Vegard for a long, long moment, and then it spoke in a language that was almost the old words, worn smooth by 1,000 years. And what it said was a name. It called Thomas by his name. They were the children of the valley, the descendants, 100 generations removed, of 6 men who had walked out of a cave one autumn long ago, cold and grieving, having lost their friends to the dark, and who had gone home and grown old, and told their children and their children's children of Thomas and Vegard, the two who went down and never came up. The story had survived when everything else was forgotten. It had become their oldest legend, and every year, for 1,000 years, they had come to the mouth of the cave and left an offering, bread and water, and a lamp still burning, so that if the two ever climbed back out of the deep, they would not step into the dark alone. Egil and the others were dust now, dust 1,000 years settled, but they had kept their promise. They had waited. Through all those centuries, somebody had always been waiting. There was one more thing the legend remembered. On that autumn morning long ago, when the six woke at the cold, dead fire and found their friends gone into the deep, one of them would not leave. Kay. He could not abandon them. He went back in just a few steps to call their names one more time, and the others, reaching in to pull him back, watched in horror as the years took him in an instant. They watched a young man wither and gray and fall in the space between one breath and the next to nothing but dust on the cave floor, because that is what the deep does to those who go in and try to come back too late. They carried no body home. There was no body left to carry. And so, when Thomas and Vegard finally understood all of this, standing in the strange, soft light of a world that was not theirs, they understood the last and worst thing of all. There was no going back. Every road home led only deeper, and deeper meant further still, into a future that would never be theirs. The people of the valley were kind. They took the two lost men in and fed them, and gave them a place in the quiet valley, beneath the same old mountains their friends had loved. And in time, Thomas and Vegard came to understand that they had not, after all, lost everything, because all around them, in the gentle faces of these strange and distant children, were the eyes of Egil and the laugh of Runar, and something of Kenneth and Stefan and Torbjorn, and even something of Kay, carried down across 1,000 years of waiting. Their friends had not vanished. They had simply gone on ahead, the long, slow way, through all the years that Thomas and Vegard had skipped in a single afternoon. And every autumn, when the leaves turn on the birches in that far green valley, the people still walk up to the mouth of the cave, and they leave bread and water and a lamp still burning, not for the lost anymore, but for the friends who came back. So when you find a door that should not be there, in the dark and forgotten places of the world, remember the 8 who went into the mountain. Remember that some doors only open one way, and that time, in the end, is the one wilderness that none of us ever walk out of. Thank you for listening. If this story found its way under your skin, subscribe to Nordic Tales so the dark always knows where to find you. Until next time, sleep well and be careful which caves you wander into.